Hello, in today's video I'm going to give a tutorial on doing free machine stitching like I've been doing on this piece here, and I'm going to talk through how to set up your machine, different ways of arranging it, and the techniques that you need. And it's just such a brilliant technique to have because, and I'll show you a few examples here and then some more at the end. You can be very expressive with it, you can use it to fill in, you can write with it, and it's a really adaptable technique to give you lots of different effects. So this is the setup that I have now. I'm very lucky to have this dedicated sewing table. So when I'm doing a large piece, and this is another one of my large flower pieces, it has a shelf that you lower so that I can put the sewing machine on that, and then a special insert that you get made according to what sewing machine you have. And that means you've got one level flat bed all the way around. And that is fantastic because you think drawing with a needle, it's about the needle. It's actually all about the movement. You need to be able to move as smoothly as you possibly can, because that's going to give you both control and the best stitch. Because if you're if there's too much friction and it's going like that, you're going to get raggedy stitches, unless that's the look you're going for, which it might be. It's good to be able to move in and out like this. And this is about the largest size that I would do on this setup, because this is just a regular sewing machine. You can get something called a long arm quilter if you're doing a lot and if you're doing bigger pieces. But thing is, if you want to do a bit right in the middle here, you've got to be able to, you have to bunch up the fabric. Now, just rolling at one end isn't so bad, because if you're going that way, you can just unroll it. If you're going the other way, you can keep rolling it. I always find this bit quite difficult, because sometimes if you're doing something right in the middle, not only are you having to bunch it up there, you're having to bunch it up here as well. So I wouldn't do anything big. I think I did one piece bigger than this and decided never again, because it was just so awkward. It depends how much wadding you've got. This is this is silk and then quite a thin piece of felt and a backing, so it's actually it's quite easy to scrunch up, and it will get a bit sort of creased as you're working on it, but it won't show at the end. So that's how I've got the setup now. But before I had this table, before I had this studio, I just had one table, this table here, in spare bedroom. And I'll show you the setup I had for that, because that still works fine. And if you're just starting, having a go at this, that's what I would recommend. So I've got this table, it's called a Sew Steady portable table, and you can order these and you say what model sewing machine you've got and they're made specially to fit that. And it has these adjustable legs so they can go in and out, so you can adjust the height. So again, you want to get it as flush as you can. That's not bad, a little bit, I think I've gone too far now, to the bed of the sewing machine. So again, you've got that nice movement. And that's all you need to do in the way of added extras. On a sewing machine you have these kind of caterpillar trucks that are called feed dogs. And when you're sewing normally, these go round and they feed your fabric underneath at an even rate that matches the needle going up and down, so you get nice even stitches. Now you don't want those when you're free machine stitching because you want to be able to move the fabric around. So on this machine, I just press a button at the side and they pop down, and a lot of machines have that capacity. If your machine doesn't, you can get a plate for your machine. So you see how you have the stitch plate here, you can get one that's completely solid and you just have to swap them over, and that gives you, still has a hole in the middle there for the needle to go up and down, but the rest of it is covered, so again you can move your fabric. And that's basically all you have to do for the setup. Another thing is, what kind of foot do you use? I use something called a darning foot, and it's got a bit of a spring on it, and it's see-through and has a large open mouth here, so I can see where I'm stitching. Now, one really important factor when you're doing this sort of stitching, actually probably any sort of machine stitching, is the height you sit at. I've got my table quite low, and it's also on adjustable legs, so I could change. It might not be quite right because I haven't sewn at this table for a long time. I might have adjusted it. And I'm also on an adjustable height chair. And the reason is, it's quite, I wouldn't say it's hard work doing this sort of stitching, but what you want it to be as relaxed as possible. And if you're in a comfortable position, you're going to find it easier, not quite so tiring. And what's recommended, if you bend your arms up, you want to have this part of your arm as horizontally as possible. So if I'm here and I'm moving the fabric around, I think I could come up a little bit maybe, but it's a comfortable height. I'm not either going to strain like that or sort of hunch over like that. And you can, some people actually put things under their sewing machine to raise them up. You can put things under the legs. But if you've got something adjustable, then that's the best way of doing it. So I've put black thread in so it shows up really well. I normally use white thread in the bobbin, but just in case a little bit comes through, I want it to show really well on camera, so I'm using black top and bottom. And I'm just going to do a stitch that I use all the time. I've just been using it on this piece here, which is just going up and down. So I'm using a straight stitch. You can use zigzag, and the needle's going to move in an even way, but obviously how you move the fabric is going to affect what it looks like. So you usually get a more uneven zigzag, but that can be a really good effect. And one thing to be really important, even though you're not using the feed dogs, you're moving it around, you do need to put the presser foot down. And that's something I would forget a lot in the early days. So I'm putting the needle down. You can pull the lower thread up to the top if you want. I'm usually too lazy to do that, I just want to get on with it. And so I've adjusted my seat, so I'm a little bit higher now, and I've got my pedal just underneath my right foot. I've got my hands flat, my arms are fairly straight, I've got my shoulders down, and I'm just going to I'm going to do it quite slowly. And then I'm going to go across and come down again. And obviously you've got two things you're in control of. You're in control of the speed that the needle's going up and down with your foot, and you're controlling how fast the fabric is moving. So you have two variables. So if I speed up but move the fabric at about the same speed, I'm going to get lots of small stitches. But if I slow it down and move the fabric really slowly, I'm going to get longer stitches. And again, it depends what effect you're going for. Most of the time I'm trying to get it as even as I can. It's when you're doing a large piece, sometimes it's the constraints of the size of the fabric. I often find that you get a little bit sort of quicker when you get into a corner. And as well as doing the straight corner, you can keep it more curved. You get a different sort of effect if you do that. And one thing I would say is don't worry too much about being perfect. I mean, it's going to take you a little while of practicing before you feel it's good enough to put on a piece of work. But even then, it's never going to be perfect. And if it was, you might as well get a machine to do it. So remember, you're literally drawing a line, you're in control, and you want it to look crafted and not, you know, like a human hasn't had any involvement in it, and not like a human has had any involvement in it. So I really wouldn't worry. And also, when you're sort of close up, it looks really obvious. When you finished a piece and stand back, half the time, most of the time, I don't notice. If I've done something really bad or it's gone really skewy for whatever reason, I do unpick and do it again, and I have to say, try and avoid that at all costs, because it takes quite a long time. So I would just recommend practicing that as much as possible. It will feel weird to start with, like any new thing that you do, you know, like in the old days when you had to find a biting point when you're learning to drive a car. But after a while, as with driving a car, sort of muscle memory comes into it. So both your brain and your body gets to know how to do it. And now, I mean, I've been doing it for years now, but even if I haven't done it for a really long time and I sit at the machine and do it again, I usually find that I don't really have to think about it, that it's sort of there in my bones and my muscles. So I'm just going to move down here and show you a couple of fill-in stitches. One of them is called vermicelli, so you're making more curves, and I actually find curves a bit more difficult. So what you're doing, you're sort of making a half circle and then you're going back to it and not quite joining it. And the good thing about it is, like, you can just change the direction. So here I want to get around these bits here, and I can just make a similar shape or approximation, and then I can get out of that corner. Might just speed it up a bit. So you can go back on yourself, and this can look really effective even if you just use just one stitch alone. But if you want to have, I mean, I like heavily quilting my pieces because it gives them a nice sort of density. And you can make this smaller or make this bigger. I try not to do, see where I've done sort of like several in a row there. I try not to do that normally because that can look a bit that sort of catches your eye. But I can, if I varied it now, so if I go, rather than going back the same way, I go in a different direction around it, and then you kind of lose that sort of row. Now the fill-in stitch that I do the most is similar to this, but you just do it with straight lines. And I think I like the look of it better, plus I find it easier to do, so I do that a lot. So I don't know what it would be called other than sort of straight vermicelli. I'm just going to stop here because I wanted to show you a gadget that I've discovered quite recently really, which is a hand grip. And what I'd say is if you're doing a lot of sewing at any one time, because everything's in the same position, your hands can feel a bit, not sort of crampy, but a little bit like that. And if you use this, which has got a grip on the bottom, it keeps the fabric nice and taut and you can move it around, and I find it's quite good because you can sort of flex your fingers a bit more. So I'm doing this in quite a big bold way just so it shows up on camera. But I usually do it a little bit smaller than that, and sometimes I do it really in a really weeny way. I'll show you one or two pieces I've done recently where I've done that. But again, it's a wonderful one for sort of getting into all shapes and crevices. And another thing you can do, I used to do it, I don't do it so much anymore, is you can get these sort of dedicated gloves that are sort of cotton gloves, and they have a grippy bit on your hand. So it depends if you're working on very slippery fabric, or just because at the beginning you're not sure about the grip, that can be a good way of just sort of gripping the fabric a bit more. So I might just change the scale a bit, and that's quite a fun thing to do in a piece, is to change the scale of the stitch because you get a different sort of effect. And another, I'm just sort of showing you some sort of basic stitches here, although these are the ones I use most of the time. And the next one is called a contour stitch. So if you've got a shape, say we call that a stitch, it might be appliqued, I might have printed, it could be anything, and you want to stitch round it. If contouring is just as it sounds, like contours on a map. You're just following the line of the shape. And you can decide how close you want to make your contours. Whether you want to stick exactly to the line or vary it a bit like I did there. But it's quite a good way of filling a large area. And not as time consuming as doing those fill-in stitches. Let's do one more. Now, if you actually want to draw with your needle, some people, I think, and I have done this occasionally, you can actually take a light coloured pencil, and if it's quite an intricate shape, you can draw it on and then you can follow that. But I quite like the sort of randomness of not doing that. So say if I do just like a sort of daisy. So you can either do it in quite a bold graphic way like that, but I quite like to do it in a more sort of sketchy way, so it really looks more like, you know, a pencil line. So I might do a couple of lines. And I'm not worried about them being exactly right because as I say, I like that sort of more immediate, sketchy sort of effect. And maybe this one I'll go 3 times round just to add to the variation. It just depends what effect you're going for. And as you can see, the fabric, because I've moved over, the fabric's getting a bit bunched up. So you can either roll it up or fold it. Depends how bulky it is, but you've always got to have your hands around this area so that you've got maximum purchase. Oh, I think my lower thread has run out. There wasn't much on that one. Yeah, so I'll redo that. But you can see what a nice sort of sketchy effect you can achieve. And I'll show you some more examples of that. So just to show close up what I've done so far. So that was the up and down stitch. This was the vermicelli fill-in stitch. This is the sort of corner vermicelli. This is the contour stitch, and this is just doing a bit of drawing. And as you can see, the back looks quite neat as well. I tend to always sort of finish off the ends because I quite like keeping the back neat. But if you don't want that to be seen, obviously I could have done it in white and then you wouldn't see that at all. Now, one of the really fun things is that you can do writing. And again, you might want to, put it around this way, you might want to draw in like pencil or chalk or something, just so you've got a guide. What I do sometimes, I sometimes do just a couple of lines just so that I keep this constant height all the way along. But again, like I say, I quite like the sort of unevenness of it because I have a digital machine. If I want to do perfect writing, I could use that. But with this, it's more expressive. And I did that a bit on my Cabinet of Curiosity piece, which I'll link. Where the pieces that are in between, I did some sort of names of the plants and the fossils and that sort of thing. It's the same process as we've done before, and what I find interesting is that it does sort of look like your own handwriting. You think doing it like this, you're not holding a pen or a pencil in your hand. It sort of wouldn't, but it definitely does look like my handwriting. I don't know if that's lots of practice. Maybe it didn't so much at the beginning. So exactly the same. I'm just going to write my name. I think what it is, I know that I always do my T from that bar rather than at the bottom, and I tend to do that when I'm sewing as well, so maybe that's what makes it sort of look somewhat like my real handwriting. I think my handwriting's a little bit more even than this. So, as I say, it's not the neatest in the world, but that's not the effect I'm going for, and I quite like the sort of sketchiness of it. helpful and useful. Please ask any questions, and this is just a sort of basic introduction. If I think of some more tips and tricks, I might do another one later. So I hope you found that useful and that you'll join me again soon in the studio. Thanks for watching.